Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful for You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The sterile, antiseptic scent of the hospital room was a cruel mockery of the life that was ebbing away. Each shallow, rattling breath that escaped Finn's lips was a countdown clock, ticking away the final seconds of a future he had fought so hard to build. Steffy cradled him in her arms, her tears falling onto his ashen face, each one a tiny, desperate baptism, a plea for a miracle that every monitor in the room declared was impossible. The vibrant, life-giving surgeon, the man who had mended so many broken bodies, was now shattered himself, a vessel of warmth rapidly cooling in her embrace. His dark eyes, once so full of intelligence and compassion, were clouded with pain and a profound, gathering truth. Steffy, he whispered, the name of fragile exhalation, a prayer and an apology woven into two syllables. His hand, trembling with a Herculean effort, found hers, their fingers intertwining, a final, desperate tether to the world, to her. Don't try to talk, Finn. Save your strength. Help is coming, Steffy sobbed, the lie tasting like ash on her tongue. She could feel the life seeping out of him, a tide receding with no return. A faint, bitter smile touched his lips. No more time. Only, truth. He coughed, a wet, terrible sound that racked his entire body. Hayes, my son. My beautiful boy. A fresh wave of agony, not physical, but spiritual, contorted his features. I have to. I can't go to my grave. Steffy, Hayes's. Liam's son. Not mine. The world did not shatter, it simply stopped. The incessant beeping of the monitors, the distant, muffled sounds of the hospital corridor, the very air in the room, it all froze. Steffy's breath hitched, her mind recoiling from the words, rejecting them as a hallucination born of grief. What? No. Finn, you're confused. The pain, the medication. Hayes is yours. He's your son. With a strength summoned from the last dregs of his will, Finn's grip tightened. No. I lied. I have lived this lie, every day, and it's poisoned me. His eyes pleaded with her, begging for understanding, for absolution in his final moments. That night, after you thought you saw Liam and Hope, you were so vulnerable. So lost. I was your port in the storm. Your safe harbor. And when you told me you were pregnant, the joy, it was the purest thing I'd ever felt. He paused, gathering the fragments of his story, each word a monumental effort. But then, the doubts started. The timing. The look in your eyes when you said his name. I buried it. I told myself it was my insecurity, my fear of not being enough for you, for a child that wasn't biologically mine. I convinced myself that love was all that mattered. A single tear traced a path through the grime and blood on his temple. But love isn't built on a foundation of lies. I knew, deep down, I think I always knew. But I was so terrified of losing you, of losing the family I'd always dreamed of, that I chose the lie. I signed the birth certificate with a secret fear in my heart. I held Hayes for the first time, feeling like an imposter in my own son's life. The confession was a torrent now, a dam breaking as death approached. I had a paternity test done when he was a few months old. A stray hair, a discarded pacifier. I told myself it was for closure, to silence the demon of doubt forever. He closed his eyes, the memory a fresh wave of torment. The results confirmed it. 0 probability of paternity. Hayes is Liam's son. Steffy stared at him, her mind reeling, the image of her happy family, of Finn's unwavering devotion to Hayes, fracturing into 1,000 jagged pieces. All this time, you knew? The birthdays, the teaching him to walk, the way you look at him, it was all a performance? No. The word was a burst of fervent, final energy. Never a performance. It was real. Every laugh, every hug, every time I called him my boy, it was the truest part of me. I love him, Steffy. I love him with every fiber of my being. He is my son in every way that matters, except one. And that one, that biological truth, has been a cancer inside me. I couldn't die. I couldn't leave this earth, without you knowing. Without you understanding why I did it. It wasn't to deceive you, it was to preserve us. To protect the beautiful, fragile world we had built. His body shuddered, a violent tremor signaling the end was near. The light in his eyes was fading, being pulled into a deep, dark well. Forgive me, Steffy. Forgive me for my weakness. For my selfish, all-consuming love for you and for Hayes. Please, don't let this change how you remember me. Don't let this taint the love I have for him. Tell him, tell my son, that his father loved him more than life itself. Steffy could only hold him tighter, her heart a battlefield of betrayal, devastation, and a heartbreaking, impossible understanding. The man who had saved her, loved her, and given her a stable home was dying, and his last act was to tear that very home down to its foundations. But in his eyes, she didn't see a deceiver, she saw a terrified, loving man who had chosen a beautiful lie over a painful truth, and had paid for it with his soul. I love you, Finn, she whispered, her voice breaking. I forgive you. A profound peace settled over his features. The struggle was over. The secret was free. His eyes, holding hers for one last, eternal second, held a universe of love and regret. My Steffy, he breathed, the words a ghost of a kiss on the air. And then, the light was gone. The final, flatline tone of the heart monitor screamed into the silence, a stark, electronic eulogy for a good man who died with a terrible, freeing truth on his lips, leaving Steffy alone in the devastating quiet, cradling the corpse of her husband and the ashes of her reality. The silence after the monitor's shriek was the loudest, most deafening sound Steffy had ever heard. It was a physical presence, pressing in on her, suffocating her with its finality. The warmth was leaching from Finn's body with a swift, horrifying speed, the solid, dependable weight in her arms becoming just, weight. Inert. Empty. Her own breath came in ragged, silent hitches, her body trembling so violently she feared she might shatter. She couldn't look away from his face. The peace she had seen in his final moment was still there, a cruel mask over the cataclysm he had unleashed. Hayes is Liam's son, not mine. The words echoed in the hollowed-out chamber of her mind, bouncing off the ruins of her past, present, and future. Memories, once cherished, now twisted into grotesque parodies. The joy on Finn's face when she'd told him she was pregnant, was it genuine, or had it been a masterful performance over a chasm of dread? The way he'd held a newborn Hayes, counting his tiny fingers and toes, his voice thick with emotion, had he been counting, looking for a resemblance that wasn't there? All the times he'd soothed her fears, telling her their family was perfect, that he was the luckiest man alive, were they the words of a devoted husband or the desperate incantations of a man trying to speak a beautiful reality into existence, to silence the screaming truth in a lab report? A dry, broken sound escaped her lips, something between a sob and a laugh. All those battles with hope, the smug superiority she'd felt in having a husband who was truly, completely hers, a father for her children who would never waver, never leave, it was all a lie. A house of cards built on a foundation Finn had known was sand. She had been fighting a war on a battlefield that didn't exist, while the real enemy, the truth, had been sleeping in their home, tucked safely in the heart of the man she trusted most. Her arms tightened around him instinctively, a fresh wave of agony washing over her. He had carried this alone. 4 years. The weight of it must have been colossal. Every Father's Day, every family photo, every time someone said, "He has your eyes," Finn, must have been a fresh stab wound. She saw his devotion to Hayes in a new, blinding light. It wasn't just love, it was a frantic, fervent atonement. A desperate attempt to love the lie away, to bond so irrevocably that biology wouldn't matter. And it had worked. Hayes adored his daddy Finn. The word daddy was Finn's name, his identity. And what was her identity now? The widow? The betrayed wife? The fool? A new, chilling thought iced its way through the grief. Liam. Oh, God. Liam. Her mind raced, calculating the timeline. That terrible period of confusion, of being pulled between the steady, safe harbor of Finn and the tumultuous, historic pull of Liam. A single night of weakness, of fear and longing, had created her son. Her son, who was not her husband's son. The man she had built a life with, the man who had just died in her arms, was not the father of her child. And Liam? Liam didn't know. He had a son he knew nothing about. A brother for Kelly. The ramifications exploded in her mind like a string of firecrackers, each pop a new disaster. Hope. Brooke. Ridge. Her mother. The entire Forrester and Spencer dynasties would be upended by this. The scandal would be nuclear. And Hayes, her sweet, innocent Hayes. How would she ever tell him? How could she explain that the father he loved and remembered was not his biological father, and that the man who had been kept in the dark his entire life? She leaned forward, her forehead resting against Finn's still warm brow, her tears soaking his hair. The anger warred with a devastating, heartbroken pity. Why, she whispered into the silence, her voice raw. Why did you carry this alone? We could have faced it. We could have, but her words trailed off. Could they have? Would their love, so new and tested, have survived that truth? Or was Finn right? Had the lie, in its own twisted way, preserved them? It had given them years of happiness, a picture-perfect family. But it was a happiness built on a secret that had festered inside him, a poison that had now been released into her veins upon his last breath. The door to the room creaked open, and a nurse stepped in, her face a mask of professional sympathy. Mrs. Finnegan, I'm so sorry. We need to. Steffy's head snapped up, her body curving over Finn's in a protective, almost feral gesture. Get out, she hissed, her voice low and guttural, laced with a grief so profound it was dangerous. Get out. The nurse retreated hastily, leaving them alone once more. Alone. She was so utterly alone. The one person who had shared this secret, this burden, was gone. The truth was now hers and hers alone to carry. A final, terrible gift from a dying man. She looked at Finn's peaceful face one last time. The confessor was at peace. The keeper of the truth was free. He had died cleansed of his secret, but he had passed the torment on to her. She had to live with it. She had to decide what to do. To honor the man who raised Hayes as his own, or to honor the biological truth. Gently, with a tenderness that belied the storm inside her, she kissed his cooling lips. A final goodbye. Not just to her husband, but to the life they had shared, the life she now knew was a beautiful, heartbreaking fiction. I will protect him, she vowed softly, her voice steadier now, a promise made to the dead. I will protect our son. Your son. She didn't know how. She didn't know when the world would come crashing down. But as she sat there, holding the shell of the man she loved, Steffy Forrester knew one thing with absolute, chilling certainty: the life she had known was over. The bold and the beautiful had just become a tragic, complicated lie, and her final confession from Finnois. The sterile quiet after the nurse's retreat was a vacuum, and into that void rushed a torrent of pure, unadulterated panic. It was a physical thing, a cold hand squeezing her heart, constricting her lungs. She couldn't breathe. Hayes is Liam's son. The words were no longer just a shocking confession, they were a live wire, electrifying every memory, every plan, every hope she had for the future. Her mind, desperate for a foothold, latched onto the mundane, the logistical. The funeral. What would she put on the death certificate? Father, John Finnegan. It was a lie. A legal, documented lie. Would she have to stand by his graveside, holding Hayes' small hand, while Liam stood nearby, unknowingly mourning the son who was actually his? The hypocrisy of it was a nauseating wave. She saw it all unfold in a horrifying montage: the somber music, the black clothes, the shared, grieving looks with Liam, a man connected to her by a secret he didn't share, a bond he didn't know existed. And then, the aftermath. The reading of the will. Finn's entire estate, his life's work, his share of his mother's fortune, would it all go to Hayes? A child who was not, by blood, his heir. Would Lee, with her sharp lawyer's mind and her instinctive distrust of Steffy, eventually question it? A stray thought, cold and calculating, slithered into her grief. Could she contest it? Could she have Hayes's paternity tested posthumously and disinherit him? The idea was so vile, so antithetical to the man Finn was, that a fresh sob tore from Steffy's throat. Finn would have been appalled. He had claimed Hayes as his son with his last breath. But the law cared about biology, didn't it? The law didn't care about a dying man's heartbreaking, fraudulent confession. Fraudulent. The word echoed. Was their entire marriage a fraud? No. She couldn't believe that. The love was real. She had felt it. But it was a love built on a platform that was fundamentally unsound. It was like discovering the beautiful, historic home you'd lived in for years was built over a sinkhole. She thought of Hayes, sleeping innocently at home, unaware that his world had just been atomized. What would she tell him? Not now, of course. But one day. How do you explain to a child that the father he adores in photographs, the man he calls daddy, chose to keep a secret that defined his very existence? Would Hayes see it as the ultimate act of love, a father choosing him so completely that he ignored science? Or would he, as a teenager, as a man, see it as a fundamental betrayal, a theft of his true identity? The weight of that future conversation felt heavier than Finn's body in her arms. And Liam. God, Liam. Her chest tightened. She had to tell him. The moral imperative was a glaring, unforgiving light. He had a right to know he had a son. He had missed the first steps, the first words, the first everything. He'd been cheated out of years of fatherhood. But to tell him now, in the raw, devastating aftermath of Finn's death? It would look like, what? A desperate play? A move to snare him in her grief, to use their shared child as a lifeline now that her husband was gone? Hope would see it that way. Her mother would see it that way. The entire world would see Steffy Forrester, the Black Widow, weaving a new web even as her husband lay cold. But if she didn't tell him, the secret would become a cancer inside her, just as it had been for Finn. It would poison every interaction, every shared glance over their daughters' heads. It would make her a liar, just like him. She was trapped in a nightmare of impossible choices, a labyrinth with no exit, constructed by the man she loved. A sudden, shocking burst of anger flared in her chest, so intense it was a relief. How dare he? How dare Finn do this to her? He had unburdened his soul for his own peace, but he had damned her to a life of carrying this terrible, divisive truth. He got to die the noble, confessing hero, and she was left to clean up the apocalyptic mess. He had robbed her of her rightful grief, tainting every precious memory with the acid of this revelation. She couldn't even mourn her husband properly because she was too busy grappling with the fact that he wasn't who she thought he was. The anger faded as quickly as it came, leaving behind a deeper, more profound exhaustion. She looked down at his face, so peaceful in repose. This wasn't the face of a malicious man. This was the face of a man who was terrified. A man who loved a woman and a child so much that he built a fortress of lies to protect the perfect world he thought they had. He hadn't done it to hurt her. He had done it because the thought of losing them was a pain greater than any he could imagine. Even greater than the pain of living a lie. A soft knock came at the door. This time it was her mother, Taylor, her face etched with a grief that mirrored Steffy's own. "Oh, my darling girl," Taylor whispered, rushing forward. As her mother's arms enveloped her, Steffy finally broke. The sobs were wrenched from the deepest part of her soul, great, heaving waves of sorrow for the man she lost, for the truth that shattered her, for the impossible future that lay ahead. She cried for Finn. She cried for Hayes. She cried for herself. Taylor held her, murmuring soothing, meaningless words. "It's okay, Steffy. Let it out. I'm here. I'm here." But Steffy knew it wasn't okay. It would never be okay again. Her mother was holding her, but she was completely, utterly alone inside the prison of Finn's final confession. The first chapter of her life with Finn had ended with a vow. This chapter was ending with a secret that had the power to destroy every relationship she had left. And as she clung to her mother, the ghost of her husband between them, Steffy knew the battle for her family, for her son's future, and for her own sanity, had only just begun. The bold and the beautiful had never felt so hollow, or so terrifying.